one topic only this way.
You can hear me? Everybody can hear me, okay. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, so I think we are about to start. Maybe the last people can find their spots. So, welcome everybody to this night, to our 7th roundtable of the Awareness Akademie, organized by the Club Commission. I'm Katharine, I'm part of the project Awareness Akademie, and me and my colleague Lubam, we will host the night. Before we start, I just want to let you know that we are streaming this live on Instagram and Facebook. People can interact there, but just that you know that everything you say here in the room will be streamed, and you are aware of this. This is the first roundtable we are streaming online, and we are having in this audience. Usually we try to create very small and safe spaces, but this time we meet because we want to talk about the topic of G and Berlin club culture, and we think it's a topic that is an interest of many people, and it has to reach a lot of people, and especially the dialogue we are trying to create tonight. So that's why we decided for this setting. We start with 3 small inputs, and after this, we will go with these panelists we have here tonight in a panel discussion. And we received a lot of questions in advance from people who want to participate with different perspectives. And as well, people can get involved online, and as well, you are invited to ask questions. And we try to make as much as possible space for this. And one thing is that one panelist that was supposed to be here, Charlotte Hirz, cannot be here because of the COVID situation. That's why we decided to have her in a small video input to not lose her perspective. So just to give a small context, we as the Club Commission, we published a statement against the consumption of G in the club spaces in Berlin a few weeks, maybe a month ago, which got a lot of positive feedback, but as well a lot of criticism and backlash. And because this is such an urgent topic for our spaces, and we needed to talk about the burden it is posing on our spaces, at the same time we realized that it's not done by just saying we are against this. It's way more than this. It's a very complex dialogue we really want to facilitate. That's why we invited a lot of perspectives and you here tonight. And I'll hand over to our first speaker now, which is Lukas. Lukas, please, can you introduce yourself, and then we go on into a little presentation.
Hi. Thank you for the quick introduction. My name is Lukas.
Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
I think you need to move it a bit closer to your mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds much better.
Great.
Hi, my name is Lukas. I'm a doctor or medical professional at Charité. I'm part of a research group which has done research regarding drug use in Berlin's club culture. And I was invited to give you a quick overview about the medical point of view on GBL. So, and you can directly go to the next slide. Okay. When we talk about G, we mostly refer to GBL or GHB. GBL can be quite easily, cheaply, and legally be bought on the internet, and is very easily accessible if people look for it. GBL then becomes transformed in the human body to GHB and activates the same receptors as alcohol does. So in some way it's quite comparable to alcohol, although much more potent and therefore associated with much more risk. Depending on the dose someone takes, you can expect different effects. On a low dose, people describe euphoria, certain activation. In that way, it's comparable to alcohol. If you take a higher dose, people start to be disinhibited. They describe an increased libido, so people are more open to sexual encounters. Sometimes even like encounters associated with a certain risk, or sometimes people tend to engage into activities they regret afterwards. That's some things we have been told by users. On a higher dose, people start losing control over their body and therefore starting to lose control over the situation. And at some point, unconsciousness can come into play. That's when we talk about an overdose. So people start to lose the ability to breathe, and that can lead to death. From a medical point of view, there are three main risk factors regarding GBL. The first one is overdosing. The second one is the interaction with other substances. And the third one would be the dependence potential. Overdosing with GBL can happen quite quickly because the dosing range is quite narrow, so even a tiny bit too much can have severe consequences. And this is especially true when people have been using other sedating substances before, like ketamine, alcohol, for example. So when people use the substance or the drug in a club environment spontaneously, have been using other substances before, that's when the situation becomes riskful. Unfortunately, as you probably aware, GBL is also abused by people as a so-called date rape drug. So people are given the substances without their knowledge. So people then become more compliant or lose control over the situation and then are abused by others. That's certainly something we're going to talk about. Then the dependence potential as a third point is something we see in the hospital quite often. Can go to the next slide. You don't become dependent right away when using GBL, but GBL has a high psychological and physical dependence, risk of dependence. So if people start using it not only on the weekend at parties, but during the week, every day, several times a day, that's where people become addicted and dependent on it. And the problem is when you stop using GBL and you are addicted, you are facing severe withdrawal symptoms. Those can be on the physical side, like tremor, shaking, sweating, an elevated heart rate, increased blood pressure. But on the mental side, people lose orientation. They don't know who they are, where they are, what is happening around them. They're delusional. They have hallucinations. Probably they're seeing animals walking around, insects crawling on the ceiling, on the floor, sometimes even on their skin, in their body. And on the physical side again, organ failure can happen, seizures can happen. So a GBL withdrawal without medical support can be very dangerous and very risky. Sometimes we have to admit people to an intensive care treatment units, and people die when they do have a GBL withdrawal without medical support. What we do is we give them other substances to substitute GBL, like diazepam, which is a benzodiazepine, and then we give it accordingly to the dose. And over 3 to 7 days, we can decrease the dose until the withdrawal is over. So there's a safe way to do such withdrawal, but it's very risky when doing without medical support or at home. Next slide. I'm part of a research group at Charité, like I said before, where we looked into the use of substances in the Berlin party scene. GBL was used in 2019 by 9.4% of the people who go into clubs in the past 30 days. So that every 10th person is using GBL in Berlin's clubs, roughly, which doesn't seem too much compared to other substances like amphetamine or MDMA, for example. Every second person was using those substances in a club environment. But what we have noticed, if you look at this graph, starting in 2015, roughly 2% used GBL, and then it increased to 4%, 7%, and then 9.4% in 2019. So there's a steep increase. We don't have any data yet after or during the COVID pandemic. But what we have noticed so far is that people who have been using GBL as a coping mechanism or as a way to like in their daily life. Those people have continued to use GBL, and they're still showing up in our emergency department and in our hospital. So there was not really a decrease in the use of GBL, but it's something we have to look into. So we are planning to do a new survey to better understand why people are planning or are using GBL, and what brings them into addiction, to better improve the prevention and also the treatment. Next one. Another important topic I quickly would like to talk to you and with you about is what you can do when you see a person with an overdose. Might it be at home, might it be in a club or at a party. First thing you can do is just do something. Check if you can reach to the person, if she can respond, if she's consciousness, if she's breathing. If she's not, or if you see someone in an overdose, in any case, inform someone around you, inform staff, or call the ambulance. What you can do next is put the person in a so-called recovery position. You probably know that from a first aid course, because when people are intoxicated with GBL, they tend to throw up and then suffocate on their puke, so that's something to prevent that. And continue to check how they're doing, be with them, and when they regain consciousness. A point that might be important to you is that when you call an ambulance and you mention drugs, someone might be scared that the police might get involved. So to prevent that, it's actually quite easy. Just name the symptoms someone has and not the substance someone has used. So for example, if you have someone being intoxicated with GBL, you can say something like that: I have a 30-year-old person. She or he is not responding to me. She might be unconsciousness. She might have used any drugs or alcohol. I don't know. I need help. And then help will be on its way, and without the police getting involved. Okay? So that was a quick overview over GBL from a medical point of view, and I'm very much looking forward to go into further detail with you later. But now I think I'm handing over to you, Pansy.
I will make a small transition. Thank you very, very much, Lukas, for that insight. I just want to add something that I forgot before, after this input, that we all here ask everyone to involve with this topic, as it's a heavy and complex and a very sensitive topic, with as much respect as possible and with as much understanding as possible and openness for different perspectives on this, different ways of engaging in nightlife and as well with G. And I think Pansy, our next speaker, has to say more about this.
Hello, my name is Pansy. Please don't make me stand up. This is very complicated to do so. I apologize actually for looking this way. Normally when I give these talks, I am in my daytime looks, but I have to host a party after this, and so I'm sorry if I make you feel bad for not dressing up enough this evening, but here we are. My name is Pansy. I'm an event producer here in Berlin. I've been producing events in Berlin for the last decade. What started as drag shows evolved into music festivals, different events, and specifically an event called Let's Talk About Sex and Drugs, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's an open forum discussion for people to come together to talk about, in an intimate setting, to talk about things that are affecting us with our sexual health, with our sex lives, and with our drug use. Because as I'm sure many of you have been locked in a bathroom in a Berlin club before, people like to fuck and they like to take drugs. And not many people are talking about these things that we're doing outside of those spaces. Because if you're anything like me, you grew up under an education system that told you all drugs are bad, you're going to die. All sex is bad, you're going to die. And we have no objective, easy, open, honest education and information to provide us with tools needed to take care of ourselves and to take care of our loved ones. So that's what we do with this event, Let's Talk About Sex and Drugs. And as Katrin so graciously started, every time we begin one of these discussions at Let's Talk, it's always very important for me to acknowledge that we are talking about very controversial, very hot button, not taboo, but heated topics that everyone has different experiences with, different emotions that are tied to them. And so we really try to come from it as a place of objective understanding and compassion as possible, to know that not everyone takes drugs the same way that you do, not everyone has sex the same way that you do. Some people do it differently, more, less, in crazy scenarios that they may think is completely pleasurable and normal, and you might find wrong or disgusting. And we try to separate ourselves from the language of wrong, bad, no, those kind of things, and really focus on simply what people are doing, how we can assist them to protect themselves, to protect their friends, to take care of each other, to engage in these pleasurable activities in ways that are both empowering and safe. And so we really try to say, when we are discussing these topics, that it's not coming from a place of no, but rather why, or how, or what can we do to make this better, healthier, more pleasurable, more open. We believe that communication is key to that no question, no concern is too off topic or unnecessary, and that the more knowledge that we have and the more that we communicate with our friends and our loved ones throughout the evenings that we go out, during our sexual encounters, the better off we are as a community and as people that hopefully are understanding that some drugs are good, most drugs are good, all sex is good, you know, and we should be doing it and having more of it, hopefully, but doing so in a way that increases our lives and those lives of those around us, and hopefully in the process can change the society in which we live in that currently views these things with puritanical condemnation that clearly gets us nowhere.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So
I'll just go ahead and say I'm one of the people that openly criticized the post from the club commission. And that's why I'm on this panel tonight.
Exactly. So after this perspective, we are now handing over to Charlotte, who cannot be here with us, and are listening to her 3-minute video. Charlotte is talking from the perspective of a psychologist who's working especially with women who are affected by sexualized violence, and I guess she will talk more about it in her video, but soon. There we are.
Nice.
Hi everybody, my name is Charlotte, and unfortunately I can't join you live today due to the rising numbers of this freaking pandemic. So I prepared a little input from my living room, which I will be sharing with you so you have a little bit of my perspective and my expertise present today. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work as a trauma counselor mainly with women who suffered sexual abuse and sexualized violence. And I also work in a psychedelic ambulance on music festivals where I take care of people who had an overdose or simply a bad trip. So my perspective on the topic of G is mainly influenced by the experience of women who were drugged against their will and then assaulted and or raped. So this is a very, very specific aspect of this discussion, and in my opinion, it should be differentiated really clearly from the intentional use of G and people who take it willingly. Working with people who were drugged and then assaulted under the influence of G is can really, really easily lead to blaming the substance or putting all the emphasis on the substance. But I personally don't think that this is the problem, because the problem is not the substance, the problem is patriarchy and people who rape other people. So you could actually use any other kind of substance that lowers the ability to fight back or to move, to have this discussion around. So I think G is not really the problem here. For people who experienced an assault under the influence of G, on the other hand, the consequences that they face are really severe, because on the one hand, it's the violence of being drugged against their will, and on the other hand, it's the experience of sexualized violence that they had to endure, but that they often can't remember anything about afterwards. So the trauma lives in the body, and even when we don't remember or our brains don't remember, the body does. So I often have clients who have trauma symptoms like panic attacks or who are triggered, but they don't really know why and they can't really remember what happened to them. And that makes it especially hard to process and to heal. So when talking about G in club culture, my experience is limited to the situation where it's abused to perform violence, and that is something completely different than consuming G willingly. And in general, I think it's really important to educate about the specific substance and to work about or around ending the stigma about it. Because the stigma often works as a second illness because people are so afraid of being associated with the substance, either because it was used against their will or because they take it willingly. The stigma is so huge that people easily like shy away from it or just leave the scene when somebody had an overdose, and that makes it really, really dangerous actually, and prevents people from getting help. So opening the discussion about G and all the different aspects of this very potent substance is a really important step in the right direction, I think. And I'm really happy that this panel is happening tonight, and I hope I could contribute a little bit with my perspective. I wish you all a really great discussion, and maybe see you in the live stream. Bye! Bye!
So thank you, Charlotte. So now we will go over, Luam and me, in this panel. I would just like to sum up that we already saw that in the dialogue about G, there are like many perspectives and many different directions we can approach this topic. And talking from the perspective of the Club Commission, we just again realized how like difficult this position is to balance between like being responsible in front of an authority for a safe club space and as well being responsible for all the people who are visiting clubs and who are the essential part of clubs. And actually it's about everybody being safer, being safe and healthy. So with that in mind, I would like to invite two other people to our panel, which is Karina. Karina, maybe you can introduce yourself shortly.
Hi, my name is Karina. Is that okay? I'm a booker. I book in clubs and I book festivals since 9 years. And I'm also very interested in the topic of awareness. I think it's important that we create a community that is taking care of each other. I find this community that we create fascinating from the sociology point of view, and I like to take care of people who are coming to our spaces. I think it's important that those spaces are safe. It's kind of happened that that in the last years I've been working a lot with different queer parties and promoters, and yeah, I've been also doing a lot of night management. Obviously, we're all friends, and we all know each other in the scene, and we talk a lot. And the topic of G is definitely coming a lot. It's coming up all the time. There is a lot of very scary stories. There is a lot of people that we don't really know what's going on with them. It's kind of like this backstage talk, you know, what happened last weekend, da-da-da. I think that it's a very, very risky substance. I think that that we are now in a situation when we have clubs or festivals full of people that we kind of are responsible for. Of course, everybody is free to do whatever they want to do, and everybody is free to take all the drugs and drink all the alcohol in the world. But at the end, we're gonna be the people who have to call the ambulance when it's the moment, and it's become a very heavy situation, which I think many users are not aware of. Because of course when you're just using and you're just doing it the right way, you're lucky, you didn't get spiked, everything is fine. But then from the point of view of a night manager, for example, it can get very dramatic. I mean, I have a story of a friend of mine who sadly passed because of G as well, who was a night manager, and he was telling me a story from one of the Berlin clubs when at some point he had to call the ambulance 13 times. And imagine that, guys, this is literally every time. It's a person in a near-death situation. You don't know what's gonna happen to them. They're on your hands, and you have to take the responsibility. It's extreme. It's really, really dramatic. On the other side, of course, we love our people, and we want them to feel free. We want them to be free, and we don't want to judge them. But we have to take care that our spaces stay safe spaces. And I have a feeling that in this whole discussion about G, we had a lot of perspective of the user, but we didn't have the perspective of the people who have to deal with what's happening after it's been taken, and also this big topic of sexual assault and consent on G, I think, because we've been watching that as well. Like we also have to deal with the girls and the boys who get raped, who get assaulted, and this is extremely heavy as well. And I honestly think that it's very important that we talk about it now, and that we start, each one of us, taking responsibility for this society that we have here, and find some kind of way of dealing with G in general. What else can I say? Yeah, it's, of course, we watch people taking different drugs all the time, and we find it fine. But somehow this one seems extremely risky, and that's why we need to find a way to deal with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So before we go on and go deeper, I would like to pick up the other two people here. So we have Rü from Sonar. Rü, maybe you want to say hi and introduce yourself before we hand over to Luam.
Yeah, I'm Rüdiger called Rü. I work for 25 years now in harm reduction projects, doing drug work in Berlin and abroad or beyond. And I'm a social scientist. I'm public health manager, let's say. Yes, and I'm now, since 3 years, one of the coordinators of Sonar, which is a safer nightlife project, and we have many partners doing the same, actually going into the field, organizing info stands, offering harm reduction info and material, offering this for free to clubgoers, and we also offer training for staff and management.
Thank you, Rü. So I'm left to introduce myself. I'm Luam. Most people know me in nightlife as Lu. I'm an event promoter, activist, I guess, and have been a nightlife advocate with the Club Commission for 3 years now, mainly focus on awareness, diversity, sustainable club culture. And yes, I mean, as an event producer, as Pansy said, I do find myself in, or as Karina also said, like I personally feel like there was a raise, or there is a raise in the use of G. And from a Club Commission perspective, issuing a first statement from particularly based on the wishes of the clubs to express their anxieties around the use of the drug in their spaces was very important, but we also heard and felt that further discussion, especially around the stigmatization of the use of it and the whys and hows, as Pansy said, was very important. And so I feel very hopeful that this is going to be a Kickstarter, because obviously it's impossible to grasp the complexity of drug use and the reasons why people use drugs in certain spaces in 1.5 or 2 hours. But we still want to try and maybe get a little insight based on these amazing perspectives here. And like one of the questions that came up very early on in our pre-meeting, which I found very interesting, was, is there a way of using G safely? And I think that's I don't know who wants to maybe go
Yes.
into it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Pansy, maybe you can
And Lucas would probably have
elaborate.
something to say about this as well.
Yes, please.
There are ways of harm reduction when it comes to GHB use that can be managed and can be used safely. The problem with that is that when you enter a club setting, when other substances are around or involved, or when you have other people that are around that you don't necessarily know what they've taken or how long ago they've taken that thing, that it becomes more complicated. So it's undeniable that in a club setting, safer use becomes more difficult to execute. But if we're talking just from a clear-cut standpoint of what, with GHB, safer ways to use it, it's, first of all, it starts with the substance itself, understanding if you have GHB or GBL. They are two, you sort of touched on what they are, not to get too technical about what the differences are, is GHB is a natural substance that's produced within the human body and a couple of other places in the world as well. GBL is a chemical synthesized version of it that is a solvent, so it is used in things like floor cleaner, paint stripper, but it is not a floor cleaner and a paint stripper. Please let's remove that title from the language when talking about GHB. It is not one of those things on its own. That language is the explosive language that leads to further stigmatization. So having said that, if you know the difference between the two, GHB is automatically synthesized in the liver, and so therefore the amount that you need to achieve euphoria is, it doesn't, getting my words mixed up, it takes longer to achieve that level of overdose than it does with GBL, because GBL has to be processed through the liver. It takes a little bit longer, and therefore it takes more of the substance to reach that point. And therefore many people that don't know when they have GBL or GHB will often take too much because they don't feel the same as maybe they did when they had it another time, so they're trying to reach that same level. So we start with the substance itself. The first thing is you have to know if you have GHB or GBL. This, of course, also is very difficult when you're taking that drug from a friend or someone you just met in the club. So the second thing would be knowing your drugs, knowing where you get your drugs, and keeping those drugs to you. We all want to share them, but at the same time, if you're dealing with a substance that is more high risk like that, the safest thing to do is manage those things yourself. Then, the tools in which GHB and GBL is administered, it often is through pipettes, putting that pipette into another substance, because drinking the substance straight can cause chemical burns in the throat, it can burn your teeth, it can change the sound of your voice. All of these things go along with that as well. Therefore, putting in a pipette that is glass, that has chemical safe labels on it, because if it's using a plastic pipette or a pipette that doesn't have chemical safe labels on it, then the markings of how much you've taken or how much is being used can wear off, so you are not able to see what level you're actually at. The safest way to actually measure this substance is to weigh it out on a scale instead of using a proper pipette, to weigh it on a scale like you would with many other drugs that we could talk about at another time. So knowing your dose is a thing as well. With GBL and GHB, the dose is specific to the person's body weight. It's specific to how much they've eaten that day. It's specific to their tolerance level for the substance, because you do develop a tolerance level over time of how much GBL or GHB you've taken. So it's always best to start lower than what you think that level should be. So the average dose is 1.1, less than, or 0.8 milliliters, microliters, essentially,
Yes.
what is it? Milliliters? Yeah, milliliters. 0.8 milliliters to 1.1 or 1.2 size range, depending on people. Always starting less, and then work your way up through the evening, because you can always take more, but you can't take less. And when you take too much, then you're pretty much on trajectory to having a bad time. So starting lower, starting slower, and also specifically focusing on really trying to just focus on this drug, especially as people that are starting to get to know it, understanding how you're using this drug, how it affects you personally, using that time to familiarize yourself with this drug, what it does to you, what it does to your friends, how you feel on it, how it's changing your perception of what's going on around you. And then finally, timing. So it takes about 30 minutes for GBL and GHB to pass through your body, but then it takes another 90 minutes for it to be completely processed and expelled. And so oftentimes people will say, oh, you can do it in 60 minutes, or the new thing is 45 minutes now, but like 90 minutes really is like, for myself and for my partner that I do, let's talk about drugs, that's what we say is 90 minutes is the minimum that you should be timing your doses in between. So for us, that means setting a timer on your phone. Some people have developed little lights that are set on timers as well, so they can click that light. It's an accessory for their party for the evening, and then when the light goes off, they know that it's time that they can safely dose again. There's all kinds of ways that people have been developing systems like this, but the important thing is that if you are timing your doses correctly and spacing them out evenly throughout the evening, the risk of overdose is significantly, exponentially lower because the drug is almost left your system. The half-life of the drug that it would take to reach overdose is simply not possible. And so timing the dose correctly, knowing the dose correctly, knowing the systems in which you're taking that drug do lead to safer uses. Can things happen? Yes, absolutely. Can something possibly change over the course of your evening that changes what you would normally do on a regular night? Yes, absolutely. So again, these are risks that come with all drugs, not just GHB. And so when we're talking about them, I believe personally that we have to look at it as rationally and clear-headed as possible to the substance itself. And I'm sure either of you would also want to contribute to that as well, because I probably said something that maybe you don't agree with, or...
I could say something on top. Do not mix it with pretty much anything. Yeah. No alcohol and no drugs.
Absolutely. Alcohol increases the chance of respiratory failure, so not mixing it with alcohol for sure. Water, juice, when you drink it.
So I would like to ask Ru, as you are having a lot of experience with trainings and as well being present with information at clubs and so on, talking about safer use, what are the main factors that are, like coming against it? Like, what are the main risks? And
that make the use unsafe, you mean? Yeah, well, I just want to mention as well, it's very individual, because you mentioned the body weight, for example, and so on. But it's also, I just want to stress this out, that it's very individual, and some people take like 0.6 and they feel like, okay, there's something going on, and others, take 1.5. So that's a huge difference, of course. And we really have to take this in mind, and we try to tell people to really, to dose really, step by step, as you said before, and to be really cautious and not to overdose at the first time, because people tend to orient themselves by their friends and take it together with others, and then they pass out sometimes really often or early. Well, what makes it unsafe? I think you already began, of course, it depends on the setting as well. Drug use is always a mixture, or the experience and the risks as well are always a mixture of the drug, of course, and depends on which drug or which substance it really is, and so on. You have to be really aware of it. But it's also your set, your individual coping possibilities, your body weight, all that, your body fitness and all that, your tolerance level. But it's also the setting, and I think this is maybe the key we're talking about today. So it's a special setting. There is parties, like private parties, but also clubs where it's possible to take it relatively safe. There's no safetiness, of course, it's always a risk, but you can reduce the risk significantly if you follow, what Pansy just explained. But usually, since G is not tolerated in most of the clubs and in most parties, of course, it's more risky, because people have to hide somewhere in the corners. There is no lights. Well, if they bring, for example, their pipettes or the syringes to the clubs, and they are found, they are pushed out. So people tend to eyeball. I don't know if you know what that means. So they bring a little amount of it, and then they try to figure out, how much. But this is, very risky indeed, because it's such a small amount that you actually have to take. And then, as well, another thing is what really worries us as a supportive project, we try to be, is what you already covered a little, that people don't talk about it. So even when their friends pass out, they don't talk openly to the security and tell them about that G was involved, for example. And that really worries us, because it can be life-threatening. It's rare, of course, if you are aware of the safer use skills, but people are sometimes not really uneducated, or you have a kind of individual condition, and then it's really dangerous. It can be dangerous in rare cases, but still. Or if people are really not educated, let's see, or
depends
there's
on
a
the
lot.
party.
Yes, I think this is another thing, really to
really
stress
does.
out, because of course it's a kind of culture, It's whether you. Whether you encultured it in a way, whether there is certain rules and certain habits to reduce the risks, and if people don't follow these kind of rules, then of course, it escalates. And but coming back to, then I ended this time for this time. It really worries us that people don't feel accepted because they are G users, and then don't call, for example, for help if somebody, is in trouble.
That's a lot to take in, I guess, because from what I hear from both sides is that the drug itself can be used safely, but then at the same time we're here because it doesn't seem safe to club owners or promoters in a lot of ways, and that the only reason why we're having this discussion might actually be that with rising use of G in clubs, there is more awareness of the possibilities of overuse, and if there wasn't a stigmatization by clubs or guests or friends or whatever, then we wouldn't be in the situation that we have more overdoses. And then also what I'm hearing is, because we kind of touched on it, that it's being used by certain people more than others, and I'm just going to name them, like queer people particularly, because like from years ago, what I knew was my friends were using these drugs at sex parties at home somewhere. And then with years, I guess, it has kind of become the standard clubbing drug, and there's no necessarily sex involved anymore because everybody's about to pass out, from what I'm seeing, right? So maybe we can talk a little bit about how does this kind of go together, or how has this sex drug changed into becoming like kind of the everybody's darling in club culture and dancing.
It's cheap. It costs you like, what, 30 cents to be high all night, or maybe €1. That's it. I mean, and it makes you feel very sexy. So I think this is like the magic of it, that it's very easy to get, it's half legal, and it makes you feel really good about yourself when you do it right, you know?
Yeah.
That's the secret.
And you can get high by it. I mean, as a sociologist, I must say, there is nothing like a sex drugs. I mean, this is a narrative, of course, you know, it's a label. Of course it's good for sex, because every time I'm high, of course, you know, I'm feeling more, motivated to do things. I'm not that comfortable with not being high. So, of course, there's a big driver or a factor, you know, that motivates people to take drugs. But this is the same for ecstasy. Ecstasy was labeled as the sex drug in the beginning as well, and alcohol is the sex drug itself. So it doesn't make sense to me. Of course, yes, it works, of course, and yeah, but it depends on how much you take and the setting and your personal motivation to take it, and of course it's a dance drug as well. And I think we're at the point we have to accept it because it's widespread amongst youths or younger users or so.
Pansy, you feel like adding something to it?
Adding, but also going back a little bit to what he was saying before, because it's also essentially how this conversation started as well. We haven't actually touched on the topic of prohibition and how that is usually the general response when we have a drug like this, because we're unsure if it's safe, that the immediate knee-jerk reaction is prohibition and punishment, which is essentially police mentality. And we know from the years, that hundreds of years with many different substances, that prohibition simply doesn't work. And on the one hand, I understand from a club point of view that you don't even want to deal with all the extra bullshit that comes from when people overdose. And the obviously, because we're talking about drugs and in a greater societal standard where the majority of the people of the world don't use drugs or have drugs around them in the same way that we do, being club goers and people that attempt to live outside of what is socially acceptable, we're dealing with them directly in ways that most people simply are not. And we're also dealing with drugs that are illegal, right? And opening up the can of worms of legality is, we don't even have time for that in this conversation, but if we remove that barrier, legality is often the reason for prohibition also in the first place, because if someone dies in the club, if these drugs are found in the club, then the club is shut down, the club no longer exists, which is obviously a very real threat, and especially when our spaces are under threat automatically, that's something that we have to deal with. And it's also like an answer that I personally don't have. I don't know how to answer that question. So instead of trying to answer that question, I'm focusing on how can I help the people that are directly in front of me. And we know, or at least I know, and many other people know, that prohibition doesn't work. So if we remove prohibition from the equation, what are the steps that we can take to ensure safety in these spaces? Because as you mentioned, like when you have something like prohibition in place, people are forced into dark corners, and so they're not able to dose themselves properly. They're forced to use tools and techniques that are unsafe off the bat because they're not able to measure them correctly. They're not able to know exactly what they're getting. When something does happen, they don't go to the proper channels to receive help, and are even scared of saying the things that they need to say in order to receive the correct help. And so prohibition ends up creating more problems that are unnecessary when they shouldn't be there. But again, what is the solution to that? Because if someone dies in the club, then the club doesn't exist. You know what I mean? It's just like the snake ate its tail. And so I'm attempting to focus more on like changing actual drug laws, talking to people in power to change these laws to show that harm reduction does actually work in the long run, to show that this way of living is totally valid and can be done so safely, and that the method and the modes of prohibition and punishment are actually just further creating the problems that we need. So if we have spaces, if we have clubs that make it obvious that, you know, or what am I trying to say? If we're providing information within clubs, I remember on this is how I can end this thought. In the way this conversation started on this Instagram post, there was a comment from a person that says, I get this harm reduction talk, but I don't actually get it because the club is not a fixed point. People are not going there to get help. Why not? Yes, you can. Why can't you? We have the potential to truly radicalize like the way in which we are engaging with each other, not only in these spaces, but in the real world as well. So if information and harm reduction techniques are made available and put into practice in club spaces, hopefully those can grow into bigger methods and possibilities of use in the real world. At the same time, I fully understand where you're coming from, and try to rationalize that with myself as a club producer and promoter as well, of what happens, like at a party, at a show that I just had on Friday, somebody collapsed, and we had to find a way to deal with that as well. So I don't think that there's any right way to deal with these things. I just know that prohibition is not that way, you know?
I think the key is really to understand both sides and to navigate in between and to always have this dialogue. And because at the same time, we really have to acknowledge that a club, as we have it now in Berlin, is a very precarious institution with very limited resources. And maybe Karina can give us an insight on
I'd
how,
love to.
with what kind of tools are you working? What kind of support systems do you have? And
So basically, why is G banned from many clubs? It's mostly because it's a very specific substance that is causing a lot of trouble, that is bringing a lot of risk, and we are not only talking about the users who overdose, but we also are talking about the whole sexual assault part of things. So it's not only the users who don't really want to harm anybody, who come inside, just want to have fun and they just did it wrong, but there is also very certain people who are coming inside. It's not only friends in a club, you know. In ideal world it is. In ideal world we are one beautiful society of people who are supporting each other, but actually there are predator people coming inside and spiking girls' drinks, and I experienced it myself twice, and guys, I can't say swear words, it's horrible. It's horrible, and I don't wish that to anybody. So this is another risk that we have to deal with when it comes to G, and it's just simple to find it. You know, it's not so simple to find all the other drugs that people might want to smuggle in, but weed and G, this is this thing that you can really search for. We just tell securities, okay, look for the little bottles, and you got it. And after talking to the securities about this topic, I had this process many times because we would transform the clubs into more queer spaces. So then the G started coming in a little bit more, and then we were like, okay, let's start reacting to this, and it really brings effects, searching for it and fishing it out and putting it to the side. So that's why we are banning it, because it's pretty effective. And on the human side, I do stand with every single one of you saying, okay, we are not really solving anything by banning it from the club, but from the club perspective, yes, we are solving. We are just avoiding this situation when we have to call the ambulance, right? On the other side, that's one important point that we made when we spoke a little bit before. Lukas is saying in the club there is people actually watching over other people. When people use G at home, there is nobody watching them. So at the end, maybe it's better that they use it in a kind of controlled environment where we can see, okay, something wrong is going on. We need to call the ambulance now, and then the help is coming faster. So this, again, in the ideal world, it could be that clubs can be the space to do drugs as safely as it gets. But then on the other side, it's personal, it's costs, and who's paying for it? You know, we have very limited amount of money that we have to deal with. Like, we have the entrance, we have the alcohol that we are selling. A fun fact, at the parties where there's a lot of G, there is not much alcohol being sold, right? So we kind of have to pay all those people. And in the last years, you probably realized that in most of the big clubs, at most of the festivals, definitely, we've been having awareness crews coming in, and I definitely saw that there is a rise of those groups. Back in time, it was only Eclipse. Now we have very specific super crews like TS Ravers that are very concentrated on the queer community. They can talk to people in a way different way that Eclipse had, which I find lovely. But then somebody has to pay those people. And at some point you just realize, like, okay, we have this club here, and we are not, we are a social space. We want to be this social space. We don't want to be just a place where people come, pay the entrance, they listen to the DJ, get the drinks, and fuck off. But we are also not, like a social institution that is there to take care of your lives, guys. You know, like everybody is a little bit responsible for themselves, and at the end, it's just the people who work in the clubs. Sometimes they are just exhausted of this situation. You know, it's like every week something bad happens in connection to G. Literally every week in every club, and it's not like they have to close after somebody dies. And you probably would be very surprised to know in how many clubs somebody died in a connection to G or to ecstasy, or mostly that. No.
Maybe Lukas, you can speak a little bit into because when we spoke before, I said that I've had quite traumatizing experiences in terms of trying to help someone and not being able to, either not knowing what the best thing is, and then also actually being attacked by people around me for trying to do what I can, because of stigmatization, because of the fear that they might get kicked out or whatever. But like, what is actually happening to the people that we don't see after? Like, because I never obviously followed through.
Okay, from a medical point of view, what we are trying to do, or what our aim would be, is to reduce risk to people. And what you mentioned is quite an important point. During the COVID pandemic, when clubs were shut down, we didn't see less cases. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say it was rather more cases. So people are still using G, whether there are clubs or there are no clubs, and most of the time it seems to be that at home or at private parties, illegal parties, they're an even more risk because there's no one around, and even like you spoke about a prosecution, so people are even more hesitant to call an ambulance or to go for help. So from our perspective, a club is a rather, or can be a rather safe environment because there are people who can react to someone in need. Another point I would like to emphasize is when people come to our emergency department with an GBL intoxication in very dangerous states, most of the time other drugs, most of the time alcohol is involved. Rüdiger, you touched that topic before. And again, people in the emergency department, most of the time, they are people who use G for the first time, who don't know how to use it in a safe way. So there's, again, the point of responsibility. Another point I would like to add to the picture we haven't touched yet is we talked a lot about the acute situation, how people are affected, but another point is, and I mentioned that before in my presentation, people become addicted by G. You know, they start using it at the parties, they start using it at private events, but at some point they have a beneficial, or I assume they have a beneficial effect. Something you mentioned is sexuality. That's where a lot of people use G. And at some point it becomes more and more regularly, and then people come to us for looking to do a withdrawal. And what they tell us is that at some point they stopped going to parties, they lost contact to their social network, to their friends, and that's when it becomes dangerous because they continue to use, they're more isolated, and like you said, there's a tolerance, so they use more, so they become in even more dangerous situations. So that's again the point of responsibility. Be in touch with your friends, and if someone you see starts using it more regularly and goes out of the social connections, the person might be in another situation or another risky situation associated to G, not being the acute intoxication, but being the dependency.
Yep.
Can I just add a question?
Sure,
Maybe
sure.
you can both answer to this, because we got a lot of questions before on how people can actually deal with friends, people they know who are already addicted, and how can they intervene. And I think it's very important that we could share maybe some thoughts about this, about what really people who want to help people and who want to do something can do.
Well, Sonar is actually a project. We have different cooperation partners. The Club Commission is one, Eclipse is one, but mainly the stuff is from the drug help system. We have low threshold counseling services. Actually, the Sonar people that do the info stands, they are drug counselors themselves. And it's very important to be as early as you can. If you feel like you're becoming dependent or you want to change something, because actually it's very dangerous, as Lukas stressed out, to withdraw by yourself. So, and it's an easy way actually to find this solution. I mean, now you're presenting yourself, but most of the time, it's that people don't know how to withdraw, and being accompanied by doctors or whether they need it, but it's really important, and it's easy to access actually. Of course, now it's a broader topic how to address this. If you're worried for your friends and so on, this is really an important thing to learn, of course, for the whole society, I think. But since we have these taboos, that you can experiment, maybe, if you're in Berlin, living in Berlin and you're young, of course, everybody's going out taking drugs and stuff. But if you, have your problems to control yourself, then, it becomes like tricky. And we try to address this and to break the taboos and so on. So I think there is possibilities, but of course it depends on your skills of really, in a supportive way, address this and also address or speak about your limitations, what you can bear if you're together with your friends, like experienced yourself, for example, if you have friends you're worried about, of course, it's a tricky question, but still you can approach us, for example.
I can speak on this as well, actually, because I got my start in this work through drug addiction counseling, working at drug addiction counseling services, and also myself have been addicted to numerous drugs that I am no longer, have recovered from those drug addictions, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this work and why I apply it in my club work as well. I think first and foremost, drug addiction carries such a stigma with it because it's viewed as a failure or a disease or something that's inherently wrong with you, and so much comes with so much judgment as well, that people that don't understand drug addiction or those that are around them that may be addicted to drugs have done a bad thing and are bad or are failing at life. And so most people that are addicted to drugs or are currently experiencing addiction are, I think, from my personal experience and the experience of working in this field, inherently afraid of that rejection, of reaching out to someone and not receiving the love or the care that they need because that other person maybe isn't ready or doesn't understand where they're coming from, simply because of all the other societal expectations that come along with it. So the first thing that a friend can do is simply say that I love you, I care for you, I'm here for you, thank you for telling me this, giving whatever support. The next thing, as you just touched on, is boundaries are incredibly important. That person ultimately has to help themselves. No one can help you out of a drug addiction. You have to help yourself out of a drug addiction first and foremost, period. There are resources available to assist in that process, but it can ultimately only be done from that person's life experience, willpower, access to resources, life situation, et cetera, ad infinitum, whatever. It's ultimately up to that person. But as someone that you love, as a friend, as a companion, a community member, in order to provide them support and help, there's simple questions that you can ask. How can I help you? What do you need from me? Where can I take you? Can I go with you to a counseling service? Can I go with you to a group therapy thing? Can I go with you to, these are some resources that I found with you. And at the same time saying, no, this does not work for me. I'm not able to do this at this time. Setting very clear boundaries because you want to make sure that your own life is not negatively impacted by the problems of this person's life. That doesn't mean abandoning them. That doesn't mean not being there for them. It simply means taking care of yourself so that you are able to be there for them in a better, more human way. That, to me, first and foremost, is the most important aspect of any form of drug help that you can give someone, is if your side of the street isn't clean, you can't clean up someone else's side, right? And so most people just want someone to talk to. Most people just want someone to listen to. Most people want someone to say, I took these drugs, they made me feel this kind of way, or I did these things on these drugs, and I feel this kind of way, without any form of judgment or any form of fear that letting go of this secret, this burden, this weight is going to ruin whatever friendship or relationship that you have. Because me personally, I have had that happen to me, and it fucking sucks. It doesn't feel good, and it ultimately leads to further addiction, further mental health problems, further abandonment issues, blah, 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 blah. Again, we don't have time for like a whole psychotherapy session during this, but all of these things are connected. They're tied together. It's one of the reasons why people use drugs, you know?
I think one thing that we kind of touched on, thank you for this insight for sure, but we haven't really expressed, I guess, is when we said, okay, this initial statement was a wish by particularly the clubs approaching club commission saying, look, this is kind of messing with our livelihood. Not only, it has been before, but after the pandemic and with this short window, yes, I see you raising your hand again. You're gonna be next, I promise. With this short window between lockdowns, basically, of being able to work as an economic company, basically, or try to make a bit of money before whatever comes next, it has been incredibly difficult. And there was this question that you raised: who's going to pay for training, security, training, awareness, paying them up after they got training? And then there's an overall lack of stuff in the whole field of club culture or hospitality lately. So. And I feel like that kind of has strained the situation with G particularly. Any ideas like onto how we can even assist as Awareness Academy or Club Commission in rolling out more harm reduction trainings, or teaching people how to react in the right ways, I guess, without judging. But I just feel like there's a huge lack of resources, money, mental, whatever capacity. And then actually the situation of, yes, people use drugs, and then the feeling of G kind of strains the resources, the minimal resources that clubs have at the moment to deal with, or to be non-judgmental, or to be as, I guess, loving and forward-coming as the community kind of tries to be, because in the end, they're also businesses, right? Yeah. So there's like this imbalance, I guess.
It's the monster of capitalism. Yeah. Well, actually, this was a question that I wanted to pose to you as well, is if you've established these bans, right? So that's preventative care. Is there any curative care that's happening within the clubs as well? Are you training bouncers on what to do when someone overdoses? Are you able to, not saying that you like, why not, but more because obviously resources, money, all of that is a problem. Is that something that's happening? Are there, because I haven't been to Fies Zornig yet, so I can't speak from that, but I can say at Kit Kat Club, for instance, I've specifically seen bouncers violently pick people up, throw them out on the street when they're clearly needing actual care, and actual overdose care that when you have a violent action like that, actually further increases the chance that this person is going to die. Yeah. So I feel like this curative care that should be taking places within clubs as well is a really good way to address that as well, but I would love to hear how you're addressing that.
So I've been thinking a lot. First of all, when we had the idea of this talk, I was like, I don't know what to do, honestly. Like, I have no clue. Do you have a question that you want to ask before I start? But you have a microphone Finally. In your hand. I'm not a person who has solutions here. It's such a big topic, and you don't want to exclude the people, and you don't want to spoil the fun. But on the other side, you want to keep the club safe for everybody. You want to keep it fun for everybody. You want to make it nice for your crew to work there. And let's not forget, like, people who work in clubs, we are not doctors. We get somewhere between 10 and maybe 50, It's like we are not superheroes. But there are some ways to to teach the people that are working with us. That's him. So Ru is going around and giving a lot of classes to the securities, but also, for example, for us, we had a meeting with the entire crew, or the bar people, the people from the wardrobe. Like everybody was there. Everybody could learn how the G overdose looks like. Of course, it's not only about G as well. Ru is talking about all the possible drugs that we encounter. Obviously, the securities also attended. So this is the kind of awareness that we can raise and that we do raise. As well, most of the clubs by now work with awareness crews. I believe that this is the key, because the security is, those are the big guys, you know, like you don't go to securities and say, hey, we got lots of drugs and like we need your help here. You don't do that. So that's why the awareness crews are there, and I think this is working beautifully. I experienced awareness crew being the key to taking care of people at festivals, especially. And I think this can help a lot. And at the end, we pay for those awareness crews to come and work, because it is better for us to pay another person or two persons to work in the night than have those situations happening. Of course, we don't want that. I believe it would be really cool if there was a way to support the work of awareness crews financially. And I believe it would be great if all the clubs are teaching their crews about how to deal with different drug abuse. And also, I've been thinking about more specific ways. For example, this thing that you said about searching for things, right? We search for the bottles, but maybe we should only be searching for the bottles, and if we find a pipette and we don't find anything else, we just leave the pipette there, you know? Like, maybe this is things that you know, we can add to the teachings that we do after we spoke about the issue a lot, and we got very specifically into the way of dealing with it. Yeah.
Before we continue here, there's someone that wants to speak up or ask question for a while now. So.
Probably speak up and maybe give a bit of something you can work with. My name is Gesine, I'm a journalist, raver by heart, and I've experienced a lot of people collapsing, helped a lot of people, and it did affect my raving, because for me the night was over. I'm too sensible just to go on like nothing ever happened. So, and I've been following Pansy, and I loved what you said, because you gave us a wrap up in such a short time, which was such good information, education, and that's the key. I don't know how, but we have to find a way to educate everyone. They're starting young. I pulled out 19-year-old girls, and they're doing G because they want to be cool, and that's in Berghain, not some just cis-heteronormative club, just like queer space. They want to keep up. They're afraid of ecstasy. So we need to get to a point, yes, of course, it would be nice if drugs were legal and we could have a normal conversation about them. But until then, get all the forces together that we have, people that are throwing parties and have good followership like Pansy, get journalists involved, get artists involved, not to put up the finger and say, hey, this is not bad. We know that repressions and zero tolerance politics, they just don't work. It has been like, you can take any drug, it just doesn't work. It will be in the clubs, it will stay in the clubs, so we need to get to the core and educate them young. So many people can make their own decisions. Am I going for this? Is this safe enough for me? I'm a chicken, I would never do it, totally. You have to get to the people that want to use or are using on an eye level without they're always afraid of getting thrown out, getting Hausverbot. Oh my God, Hausverbot is such a big thing. They don't want to be with their friends because they also get Hausverbot, Sittenhaft, all out, and that's not working. It just doesn't work, And seriously, if the club commission needs people to sit together on a table to come up with ideas, let's spam every club goer, every raver, because maybe one piece of information gets stuck, and you will be the one explaining in the toilet, hey, this is a bit unsafe, can we talk about it? It actually works in the toilet. That's how I got my drug knowledge. It was in the toilet, So let's be honest, and just work with our brains and our compassion and empathy, just educate and not judge. That was it.
Thank you.
So this is a super, super important point that we haven't made yet. I think this community thing, the clubs are not just the people, obviously, it's not just the people who work there. It's actually like the crowd. And I've experienced wildest parties with all kinds of crazy substances. But if everybody is kind of feeling like this is our home and we have to watch out for each other, then everything is fine. And as soon as it gets more, anonymous, touristy, we don't belong here, we just came here for one weekend, we don't care, who are you, then it gets tricky. And I really think that we need to address the community and bring back the, inside the Berliner parties where everybody really knows each other, it's working pretty nicely. But then how do we address the people who come to Berlin extra to party and they have no idea what they are doing? This is a question. Can we talk about drugs in schools? How does it work? I have no idea about German schools.
I've had schools that have reached out to me to they're mostly international schools, the bilingual schools and stuff, but there is interest in it for sure. And obviously, again, it always goes back to the legality issue of what we can talk about there and what we can't. And they always have to work around certain doors and stuff like that. But for me, the biggest threat, the biggest issue is always the person that comes to the club and has never tried any of these drugs and has no idea what the fuck that they're doing and ends up simply taking something by mistake too much, and then a bigger problem ensues. Because it's not like they did that on purpose, you know what I mean? They weren't trying to a lot of the talk that we have in these circles is that some of these drug users are doing too much and they're putting us at risk and they're doing this whole kind of thing. But actually the majority of people are not doing any of this stuff on purpose, and they're not even attempting to be selfish, as many people are or can be in this situation. It simply is an accident that can happen, that can literally happen to anyone. So we always say that education is the first thing. But then you run into the issue is people always want to go to the party and take drugs, but nobody wants to come to the talk afterwards. Yeah. I'm really shocked that so many people are here today. Thank you for coming, because getting a room of this many people together to talk about these topics is actually really difficult. Yes. I've been doing it for the last 7 years. So everybody likes the idea of talking about drugs, but nobody actually ever shows up to talk about the drugs. You know this firsthand. You've been running these incredible organizations that have so many incredible resources. The stuff that you guys do is amazing. And it's free, and they give away so much shit, but nobody comes because it's not cool, or it's not the party, or it's not the look, or I don't know. I mean, I promote these things no differently than I do any of my other events, but because they're educational, or because they're talking about hard topics, or maybe because there's not the possibility to fuck someone, I don't know, but people don't show up in the same way. So yeah, it's always just like a teacher at school. How do you reach your students? How do you reach the core? I also agree that the dancers, the audience, the club goers are the community just as much as the community, because even people that work there, they're also club goers and dancers themselves. Or one would hope anyway, right? I am. I produce clubs and work in them, but I am also a dancer and love to go myself and be around people that are fucked up on drugs all the time. How do we reach that community? It's a lot harder than one would think. It's the core issue, I think, that a lot of the topics that they're talking about come back to.
I'm really pleased that we use this term. Actually, it was a question maybe. But I really want to stress this out. the community, care approach. I like this very much, and we have to see clubs as it's a community. And I think this was what disappointed so many G users actually from this kind of campaign, that they felt like excluded, and it was literally done like, okay, you get Hausverbot, you're excluded from our community if you take G. And this is really, I mean, Lukas also stressed out, this is increasing the problems, of course, for them. They need the community, they're part of the community. And of course, we have to address the problems, and the risky behavior, and people have to learn. But to be able to learn, you have to create a kind of atmosphere, that people are really willing to learn. They understand, okay, there's people that care for me. And I think, I'm really happy that we go this way. And we're part of the solution, I think. I mean, this talk is great because we address the problems. We all pointed out, okay, it's not easy to tackle. And it's really important that you spoke out. I really want to highlight this as well. I think it was really an important step, for the club, for the clubs and the club commission, to actually, go to the public. It was really brave, by the way, from the Suicide Club to talk to the press to really, explain what happened and so on, because people, or many clubs, of course, because of prohibition or all the shitty drug policy, don't want to talk about it. But I think we're going really big steps now in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's the other side, all that fear that comes with that topic. I mean, why are clubs not speaking up? Because they really face consequences with every emergency that is coming up. There is like a backlash from the public, there is a backlash from the police, there is, and that's the reality. And I'm really curious, how can we, understand Karina, who says we are saying no to it because we just want to keep it a bit away, and how can we find a way through? And I found this point very interesting, that you made a step back and said, okay, maybe because we are learning here right now, maybe we don't take the drug away from them if we realize they have a pipette there.
No, I didn't say that.
No. But
I said take the drug away, but don't take
the drug away. Exactly, that's what I said. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. But these are like small moments of understanding. But at the same time, I think what Luan brought up, this difficulty and tension between being a financial institution, like really economic institution that's like giving the salary to a lot of people and the existence to a lot of people, and at the same time being the home and family and community to so many, and being a cultural space. And it's very difficult to navigate in between this, and for me it feels like we are always going from that point to that point and going like this. And I really believe that a table like this with all the audience is a step. And
we do it every other month, December 8th at Tipsy Bears, the next Let's Talk About Sex and Drugs.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can add here, we're gonna put a lot of resources together, and they're gonna be available after this talk as well. There will be a collection on Awareness Akademie .com, Berlin, I don't remember, sorry. And there is another raised hand or voice share over there. So,
I just wanted to say that I agree completely with what this person said, and I think that having awareness teams in parties is amazing. But for me, the next step is really that everyone in the party is doing awareness. It's great to have people scheduled that will be sober all night and available to deal with a crisis situation, but everyone should be looking out for each other. If they found someone on the floor, if they find someone being bothered by someone else, they should intervene. And in response to what Pansy was asking, like how do you make people show up for these things? Suspension is a label from Lisbon, and we've been doing these talks on awareness, but some specifically on G. And the way we found to motivate people to come was just to do it before the lineup, and you would pay like less of a price if you went during those hours. So this was a way to stimulate attendance, and we had like 20 people attending a workshop on how to deal with GHB crisis, what do you do, when to call an ambulance immediately, and the risks with like psychiatrists and even like pharmacists to tell the risks. Yeah, and I think this should be the way to go. But I agree it's super difficult when you have this super touristy scene where people don't really know each other, and this is another issue that I cannot really address.
But I think also, just to touch on that, because we've mentioned it a few times, one thing that really struck me one time is that people will come to my shows, and then they'll send me a message later and say, I'm from Rio in Brazil, and I've taken some things that you've said, and now we've implemented those in the scene here in Rio, and I'm so grateful for what you've done. That to me is mind-blowing. And like actually, you know, we here in Berlin are so lucky that we've literally created a scene that people from all over the world are jealous of and want to be a part of and want to take a part of and take that home. And that's incredible. Like, I think we often focus on a lot of the crazy shit that's going on that we forget to stop and think that we're actually doing work that is making waves across the world. And if we have these moments where even we have these more touristy parties, we're able to influence people maybe that did come to Berlin to get fucked and have a good time and be anonymous and dip out and black out or whatever, that's totally acceptable and really wonderful, and they should be able to do that. But we also have an opportunity to be able then, hopefully, find a way to tap them into their experience and their psyche and say, hey, actually, this is the way that we do things here. This is why you're coming to be able to experience this thing. If you want to be able to experience this thing, maybe take this back to where you're coming from and share that around a little bit too. You know, this is something that I'm actually like just coming to the realization of, and hopefully in the future I can learn from a bit more of, but it's kind of been brought up a few times in certain ways as well. Like, I think it's so easy to like shit on tourists that come to Berlin, like but I love when tourists come because they give me a lot of money. Like, if you want to know how to pay for awareness teams, take the money from the tourists. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
come visit
like,
Berlin.
EasyJet, like
we gotta
say it in the cameras.
I am saying it to the cameras. Hello, you have the people coming. Take their fucking money.
Don't do me. Bring the money.
But really, jokes aside, I mean, because we don't have the money, right? Like, this is ultimately the problem that we come back to, the training, the resources, all of these utopian things that we want to do, we don't have money for. I remember one of the first things that I had an awareness team for, it was all volunteers, because we simply did not have even though they were doing the work that was arguably one of the most critical positions in all of the thing, even more important than the artists that were on stage that people were paying to, because they were there making sure that everyone was safe. And I loved Charlotte, I wish she was here. The things that she said were so critical. People, if they had any kind of issues with sexual assault or anything made them feel uncomfortable, fortunately, nothing like that happened. But this work truly is the future, as you were saying, and it ultimately boils down to not having the resources to support it in the ways that it deserves to be supported. Where does that money come from? Can we funnel it from the city? Can
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Can we funnel it from tourists? In what ways can we work within this horrible capitalistic system that we have to work into to fund the things that we need to fund?
Very good points. I think one thing that I've learned in the whole time advocating for awareness and diversity is patience. Yeah. Because it takes time, like even this whole conversation around awareness and diversity in club culture. In the beginning, nobody wanted to talk about it. And I feel like G is just reaching that point where people feel the need to talk about it. And then 3 years later, hopefully, we will have the money, we will have the resources, we will have the trainings, and everyone can do their part in both. Like
that graph was wild, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's gonna get wilder while we're talking, but eventually, I hope that this kind of conversations will actually benefit in the long run, I guess. Like also research that is being done by Charité towards that particular drug or that particular scene or whatever will give us a little bit more insight into how we can, do more prevention, I guess, and then also how to react properly and maybe reduce stigma along the way.
Well, to bring
visibility brings as well, like resources. The more you talk about it.
Well, I was going to say, what kind of issues do you run into at the Charité talking about these topics? Because obviously the people at the top that control the money and the funding don't have the same knowledge or experience, one would think anyway, of and the taboo clearly obviously carries into the medical profession as well. what are the roadblocks that you're running into, or how do you see yourself overcoming them? I mean, the fact that it has a recreational drugs unit already is incredible.
Well, what you just said, the study I mentioned we did before a couple of years ago, 2019, was financed by the Senate. You know, like they had an interest to understand what kinds of substances are used in Berlin, and in what way are they used, what motivates people to use them. And now, 2 years later, we're working on implementing drug checking, for example. And this study played a role in that. And drug checking, for example, would be a huge step into the safety of people using drugs. So, like you said, it works, but it takes time. It's several years, 2-3 years delay. So, what we're planning to do now is do another research regarding GBL. You know, and that I hope at some point we can derive preventive programs, education, safety measures, improve the withdrawal. You know, like the whole concept from a medical perspective, but also those informations are going to be exchanged. So I'm quite confident that going up from the dynamic we're seeing right now, that the public is talking about it, journalists are talking about it, that we can use this momentum and put it into safer situation for the community.
I'd like to have more money for my project as well.
I can only...
And I think it's always appealing to me also to blame the capitalist system for everything. But, no, I just want to go another way as well. But because I think, okay, money is, there's no money. I found it very seducing, though, to think about a party where no alcohol is being, is the main factor of actually getting enough money for this party. But maybe you have a lot of people on G, but maybe caring for each other, that are really educated in how to use it. Then you don't sell a lot of money, but then you have enough money maybe to spend because they pay the entrance for really good carers, an awareness team, and everybody is happy. So, it's just a fantasy, I know, but I think, alcohol is part of the problem. It shouldn't be that the clubs are dependent of selling alcohol to have, to do their business, actually. So this is really a problem, and it's also this kind of double standard, There's a lot of coke and a lot of alcohol, of course, and really, of course, there's a lot of problems coming out of this, of course, for society, but also for the club culture, or for the whole community. Nobody talks about this because, it's mainly accepted. But still, there is a lot of problems out of it. Not, for the evening, and you don't have to call the ambulance so often, but still. But I also wanted to say just one sentence more. I think as long as we experience something like this, like you said, that people are drawn out literally, and put on the streets with no clothes or whatever because they've taken the wrong substance, let's say, or as long as we have this, then it's not the common ground, let's say, for thinking and talking like solution-oriented like we do at that moment. So I think we also have to think about how we communicate to our, within our community, and the way we want to find solutions, like, understanding each other, and also if there are shitty tourists, still, we have to find a way to educate them and, not to punish them.
So we have a question in the back.
Yeah. Hey. I just wanted to kind of like reiterate a bit on what Gesine and also, was it you? Was it also saying, or this person? The question to me is like, how do you change the culture? Because it seems obvious that something has to change, but nobody knows the right way to approach it. Obviously there's a problem or we wouldn't all be sitting here. But how do you change the culture without judging people, without creating more problems, And as Pansy, very eloquently put, telling people, not to do something, it doesn't work. And this is only gonna exacerbate the problem, you know. And as, was it you or someone was saying earlier, I think the awareness teams, you know, is like one of the best things that's come into club culture in recent times. And I think that their role should be expanded. And this idea about invite people down and have them become part of, like everyone becoming aware, that the answer to it is about everyone becoming aware. That's what I want to say. The answer is not to tell people, don't do something. Like, that's not the way to change culture. It doesn't work. Change culture by having people, like giving people something positive to do. To say, let's take care of each other. This is something that's important. We're a community. And, you know, let's all be aware and help each other. And yeah, like don't do something bad, but let's do something good. You know, like for me, like club culture, like love, and it's like cliche, but love is the message, you know, and I think that's something that we could work with instead of trying to like shame people and tell them that something's bad. You know, and obviously we need also like short-term solutions, but in the end, like short-term solutions are just a band-aid. In the end, like we need to work towards being more of a community that takes care of each other and knows what's going on. And yeah, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. So we have another question.
Also, just adding to this, I think, so awareness team is very important, education is very important, but having the tools to consume everything in the safest way is one of the most important things. So that's why the work of Sonar or Mancheck or whoever there is so important. And I've been living here for 7 or 8 years, and since then already you could see at parties that were like queer gay, that people were like, G is especially forbidden. So what did we create with this atmosphere of I'm not allowed to talk with anyone about this. But if then somebody's sitting there and they're like, look, we explain you how this works. Maybe even on the bottles we give you, it says how often you can take it, or you get a timer with it. Here, you get a timer. But whatever they do, this is how we can help people do it. But as long as we ignore or exclude anyone from a party, this will just get worse. And we're getting a mental health crisis right now. Like, people who actually have an addiction right now can't be helped properly. We can't do this. So we are a community and an institution. So like, we should work on both ends, not only awareness, but also make it as easy as possible to take it safe, any drug, substance.
There's parties in Zurich that I know of that we've learned of through the work that we do with Let's Talk About Sex and Drugs, that have done simple things like on the menu at the bar, they'll have drinks, alcoholic drinks, and they'll say, you know, for people that are enjoying alcohol or something like this, and then they'll have another side that are non-alcoholic drinks of like people that are on G, or they'll explicitly say like for people that are taking G or ecstasy or something heavier, please order from this side of the menu. They'll even have on the other side of that simple guidelines, as you were saying, of like ways that you can more safely take the drugs. Switzerland obviously has much different drug policies than Germany. Historically, you know, there's many things that we can talk about Switzerland's drug policies, but just these little techniques are the type of harm reduction techniques that I'm interested in implementing in the clubs, of ways that we can just bring more awareness, bring more education, better implementing simple, tiny things that maybe don't cost money, or are looped into something that already costs you money anyway. As you were saying, this simple technique of like just the pipette, that's such a beautiful thing that I wish more people would implement as well, of like, if you see only the paraphernalia, you let it through, but if you find the drugs, then you keep those behind. I mean, first of all, if they're stupid enough to like leave them in plain sight, then I mean.
That's the deal at the door.
You know what I mean? Like, come on.
That goes for other
At least
drugs
be
too.
creative a little bit, like stick it in some hole somewhere, but.
No, please don't. Actually, please don't stick G in
thank you.
any holes.
Yeah, I
Don't.
was trying to be comical, but you're very right.
I know,
You're
that's
correct.
why.
But you know what I mean? Like implementing smaller things that are simply creative. I mean, we are creative, artistic, caring people. That's what makes our community so great. So implying these kind of simple actions is a really beautiful way to try and encourage better thought until bigger changes can happen, you know, like in patients, there, you know, there's riches and niches, right? Like if you make small movements somewhere, greater change happens in other places.
I have something to say because this idea with the menu, this already emerged in the big discussion that we had about, was that about your post in a group of Cocktail d'Amour, or was it about something else? Anyway, from my point of view, I really don't want to send a message saying, hey guys, come around and do all the G in the world here. That's so cool here, because I do not wish to have the crowd that is entirely doing only this, you know, like I don't want to, because there is this 10% of the people who do it, right? We said that. I don't want to send those 10% home, and I don't want them to be excluded, but on the other side, I do not want to, as a club, I do not want to encourage it in a way, and I would be afraid that by saying, okay, here's your little cups, or here's your nice pipettes, and hey, welcome, you know, like this is how you do it, right? That I would be promoting doing the drug, and I don't want to promote that, you know. I would like to help people who do it. I would like to definitely, like 100% I agree, let's watch out for each other, 100% let's not kick out people on the street who are in trouble. Let's talk about it, but I wouldn't like to do things that make people think, hey, it's welcome there. It's not really welcome.
Well, I didn't say like give out paraphernalia, but I do think things like that aren't actually encouraging anything. They're more providing resources or a solution. I think there's a difference between like acknowledging that something happens and something is going on and attempting to curb the problems that arise from that as much as possible and encouraging something. I'm not saying like roll out a banner that say take all the GHB you want here at this club, but like if you know that people are taking it at that club, what are things that you can do that like will direct them in a place to where they're not overdosing in the bathroom? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, sure.
Like if it's more obvious that like you could receive these types of beverages for this price or whatever, or like I don't know, like these are not concrete solutions or things that I'm saying, but just examples of. The menu was an example of like ways in which this club decided that like that was the way that we can help people to order off of the right thing, because even if they are taking the G and you don't know and they go up and order a drink from the bar or whatever, if they're not like there's something about if they have that idea in their head of like, oh, I should be ordering off this thing or whatever, then the chances of them actually ordering off that thing are much greater. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like encouraging. I personally don't view it as encouraging. I more view it as like providing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right word.
No, I get your point, and I do believe that like those ways, this what you're doing, because Ru is also coming when the promoter allows. He's actually giving people the safe tools to do G as well, But I would be just afraid to hear somewhere in some conversation, hey, you know, there we got like a special card for people who do G, and we get like all kinds of nice souvenirs as well, and it's pretty cool there. So let's just keep going, because it does like what we realize. As soon as we start looking for the bottles and we start reacting to people bringing G, it stops being just easy to come inside with the bottle. People also stop coming. And again, this is not solving a problem or the issue of people having too much of it or doing too much or being addicted, but it is solving our problem of calling the ambulance often, you know, like it's pushing the problem away. I agree. This is not solving anything. Yeah. It's just like we don't want it in our house. Like at the end, it's our shift, and you don't want to have people dying on your shift. You know, it's not cool. Yeah. That's it. It's very selfish in a way.
Yeah. Okay, well, so sorry, we have one more person there, and we're already at 9.
Exactly.
So we
Before
have
we
to
go
unfortunately wrap it up.
Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to say thank you to Pansy.
Well, if it goes on for like, I can stay for like 5 more minutes.
5 minutes,
okay.
because Pansy then has to go.
More important than this.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so we
have
take
to
the
go
next
somewhere else, so
question.
if we, I don't want to. It's This is what I love so much, so I don't want to leave, but if we do, wrap it up soon.
Just what I would like to put as well before we close this for today, because this was a question that was sent to us as well several times. And I think as we all talked about how we can all be responsible or take responsibility and do awareness work, how can we be active bystanders, and what can we really do how can we recognize a person overdosing, and what can we do, and how can we be a good bystander? And I would love to talk with Lukas about this after we take.
There was the someone first, and I don't think we will have time for everyone. So.
Yeah, just really quick. It wasn't a question. It was just something to add there. Or the question is mainly why. In German we say Verteufeln, why you make a devil drug out of just one drug, because you said like about this encouraging thing, and I think that's the same argument that the Conservative Party here in Germany has when they don't want to legalize cannabis. They say, oh, we're encouraging it when we
I love
allow
to answer
it.
that.
And because I think, so I work in harm reduction as well, and I'm some sort of colleague of Ru also, and when I had like info stalls here, we were always allowed to give out anything, like also like snorting paper and cards for that, right? That is fine, that is all fine, but pipettes were not allowed. So I feel like, you know, what you're doing there is like, this is the really bad drug, but anything else is somehow okay. Cool. Like he said as well, like no G, no G, no G, but anything else is somehow okay. Yeah, I get it a bit because I see your point. It is really dangerous, but it doesn't work. Like to have one devil drug, it didn't work in the past with other drugs, you know. So yeah, I just.
So I would love to answer that immediately because I think like there is this one thing about stigmatization of using drugs. It becomes a taboo, right? And also when we talk about drugs, and we are cool enough to address the issue, we don't address it seriously enough. And there are different substances out there. There is starting from coffee and alcohol and whatever, nicotine and sugar, up to things which are actually really dangerous. There are things that are dangerous. Crack is dangerous, guys. Like heroin is dangerous. G is dangerous, like you can really die from it. And I haven't experienced people dying from like at my 9 years of work, and I have experienced people dying. In my 9 years of work, I haven't experienced people dying from other stuff than super strong ecstasy, G, and doing very stupid things on acid.
1 million people die every year in Germany from alcohol.
That's another thing. This long-term thing, of course. But we are talking about the club situation. We are talking about banning the substance in club. And yes, in a long run, alcohol is the devil, absolutely, and nicotine, right?
But let me be clear: stigma kills as well. Stigma excludes people, you know, and it's really risky for them, and it can be risky as well. I think it's. You know, you don't have to, you know, pick some, you know, something that makes you trouble, but then, you know, not looking on the whole problem. Let's say. I mean, I totally understand, of course, that you have to address it and all that, and we're in a learning process. But I think we are cutting this again when we are not allowed to let people learn. For example, by not allowing them to learn about the paraphernalia they use, they need to, to find out what a safer use looks like.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I really do need to leave. I'm starting to get nervous, but thank you so much. Y'all, please continue. Don't stop because of me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. It's been wonderful. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm sorry to have to run like this, but we agreed.
You did before.
So I have to go.
Thank you for your
welcome.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you. Oh, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
See you.
So that opened another stream of conversation
again. Right.
So it feels like we're just at square one. There was 2 raised hands. I can't see them from the front, so please raise your hand again. 3, 1. So please, who has the microphone? Okay, there.
Hi.
My name is Zoe, and I work together with Karina at the same club. And actually, we do have a tool, and it's used right now in the Berlin club scene a lot, and it's Sonar. And I think we should incorporate it quite more into our nightlives in like the actual evenings. And we have promoters and parties in our venue, which are more likely to a crowd which is using GHB way more and in higher doses. And we work with those promoters and we say, okay, you can do your party in our club, but please have a table with the whole night. And this is like our rule for them. And for us as a club, it's a really nice way to not be responsible and not have to take all those steps, because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, and we cannot make it happen in such a short of time, and we don't have the resources for that. And also it's kind of like a buffer. So from me as a club perspective, it's really, really nice to work with Sonar and to have them in our clubs. And I think we should use this as a tool a little bit more, because I don't see them very often in clubs. I don't see them in Berghain. I don't see them in Griesmüller having a table the whole night. So it would be really nice to use this tool, which we already have. We have those trained people who can really work very well with the guest, instead of like, you know, let's use what we have.
Thank you. Sorry, that was like, there are other groups offerings like Sonar, there's Mancheck, there's Eclipse, there's Rave Awareness, there are many, yes. There,
and
we hear you.
It's very limited resources we have, actually.
Exactly, so there's limited resources, but we're gonna make them available for everyone who's interested in getting in touch with Rü or the team. And I think that's a very important impulse. Thank you. There was one raised hand there.
So every single drug we have is a dangerous drug, right? Like we can always have problems. Yet we accommodate for every drug there is. When you have anything as a powder, you can see in toilets, some toilets actually make a space that you can take it more easily, so you can see it better. There's better, like, right, there's like these, so you have better light, so you can actually see it, right? Like it's all these like subtle things. Yet, in all the time GHB was there, we didn't accommodate for it. We never did this. And I think if anybody throws a party, it is our job to actually be there for people. Like putting it out is just making everything worse. So like if we don't accept that people take their substances that they want to take, I don't think we are able to throw a party, because then we can't cater to our own communities. I think this is really important. And then every drug will be problematic. Like I mean, if we cut anything out, how we're accommodating for any other substance, this substance will become a problem. So and like don't push it out of the club, because it's making it worse for everybody in the end.
I get your point again, and I said from the beginning that I'm sitting here, and on the human level, I agree 100% that like banning something is not working ever. Obviously, like we all know it. We all sit here. We are talking about drugs. Like it's obvious to all of us. But then, have you been calling? Like, did you call an ambulance for somebody? Like, did you have to deal with that situation in your life? Did you have somebody that that was literally shaking, or you know, it's just such an experience that stays with you for the rest of your life. Yes. No, I'm not saying ban G completely. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, like, if you do, for example, if you do private parties that are, let's say, sex parties, there's super sex positive, there is a promoter that is doing it in a space that allows that, then do it. You know, I'm not saying don't do it at home. Do it at home. If this is your thing, do it at home. But the clubs, they must have the right to say what they want and what they don't want. There are also parties where people say, okay, we are not selling alcohol here at all, you know. There is the right to say this is my house and I want to keep my people safe from one thing, sometimes by excluding somebody. And again, I said that already before, this is not cool to exclude people, but how do I make sure that I don't have this one guy who's coming inside, in Berghain, you have, because it's a big club with a lot of very confused girls, you have guys who come there especially to search for girls who are alone, being like, hey, let me buy you a drink. You know, and how do you make sure that they are not there with that bottle? Like, how can we? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. People go outside, they do it outside, they come back inside, you know, they do it in the dark, and I've seen that too. Yeah.
I think
that's true, and in the clubs where I've been working, we've been definitely trying to be the best that we can be for people. There is always some things happening that you can't control. There is a lot of people working in a crew. There is a lot of people working in a security. Sometimes things happen that you wouldn't like to happen. But there is a difference between taking care of the people who use G. There is a difference between informing them and taking care of them when they want to use it. But there is a big difference between encouraging it. And I just really wouldn't like to be the place that is encouraging. This is...
I'm sorry, but we have to cut you short.
You can go on with your discussion afterwards.
Yes,
we will be here for a moment. We have 2 raising hands, and then I guess we start to slowly close it because we are running out of time. So we start with you.
And then
Hi, I'm Kilian. I organize the only paramedic service who's orientated for work with users, so I work as a paramedic for a bunch of clubs right now, like Revier Südost, Renate, the Club Ost, and a lot of other promoters, and I deal with the G problem all of the time. And I think the only way that we can fix this is to also inform the users what they are doing, not only to themselves, also to our scene, and also for the perspective of for the clubs. And if you talk to them on the event, I had a very nice experience at Herrensauna last time, where a guy was passing out, and then he came back to life, and I talked with him about an hour. And after our talk, he gave me his G bottle and said, I don't want to take this drug anymore. So, and that was the first time that I really felt that the work I'm doing is really helping. So I think it's just talking about, just not to talk about, it's not bad, it's not only bad for you, it's also bad for us, it's bad for your friends, but not to judge them, it's just informing them. And that will help us out of this problem. And only if we all take care of this, and we all speak to our friends for it, and we all speak to other party guests, then we can fix it together. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you very much.
you.
You? It's you.
And I would say this is the last share. Sorry, got plans.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sharif, and I'm a psychiatrist as well at Charité, and I'm working with Eclipse project. So I'm very involved with harm reduction projects as well, and I have been dealing with emergencies and casualties in the context of GE, so I have some personal experience. And what I would like to emphasize is some sort of a middle way, because I think there might be a misunderstanding. Because, Karina, I understand that you don't want to have casualties and emergencies. And therefore, I think it's really a good idea to do the entrance controls and get rid of as many bottles as you can get hold of. But on the other hand, if you do the stigmatization and if you do not allow our projects to provide aids and materials and info flyers like syringes or pipettes, then you'll have more emergencies. And it's not going to help you with your goal. So maybe you have to address the problem from two sides, like being acknowledging the fact that there are G users and they will stay and you won't find them all. And those you have to address in a more open way, giving them information and materials and the opportunity to learn about the use and the risks. And on the other hand, try to get them out of the club, the bottles especially.
Not the people.
Not the people, but without the stigmatization. I think this is really important. And then you mentioned that you are afraid of emphasizing drug use if you deliver information and materials. And this is a really old question that has been solved. So this is not the fact. We know this from the 1980s, when from the heroin and Spritzentausch initiatives and the drug consumption rooms, it does not lead to more people consuming and coming to your clubs. It's basically a thing that has been researched, and I think you might get more counseling from social scientists like Rü is, or from the drug aid system that already exists.
So I would like to, of course, answer because I have also a little bit of a feeling that I became like this person who's banning, like for banning. We work with Rü on a regular basis, and at our events, we quite definitely know which ones are the risky, and there is always an awareness team in there. We never kick out anybody from the club who's not feeling well. We literally take care of those people. We are not banning. We are not saying, "Hey guys," like we are not posting on social media. No G. There is no posters hanging in our toilets saying "No G." You know. I think that we have like this little unspoken rule. Like if you have something on you and we found it on the door, it's gonna be gone. And I think this unspoken rule should stay this way. And I'm just trying to give you guys the perspective of the clubs from this operational point of view, because again, we all know the science, and as well, very important point is we can react and we can actually help the people better when they are in this environment of the club than when they are alone at home, right? So this is, again, it could be the safe space, the clubs. So I can see that actually we could help. You know, we could help more than just push the problem away. But I'm trying to make a point of we are just humans, we are not superheroes, and sometimes it gets really tough to see people get sick.
Can I add a quick note?
And you really had to react really immediately now. Something had to happen because, well, actually, what we have no data, you know, so far. But yeah, according what we heard, there's really a lot of G around, of course. And then with the pandemic, it was really, you know, more openly, given to uneducated users. And I totally understand that you had to be fast and immediate and you had to do something, you know. So it's not the worst that actually happened, but we have to find long-term solutions, you know, and integrative solutions as well.
I would like to hand over to Lukas.
I think you pointed out a very important topic. get paid and we get educated and we get trained to deal with situations like that. You and your staff are probably not, and I think that's something which, I can imagine how a situation like that feels if someone died in your club, if someone is abused in a club, and it's putting a lot of emotional stress on the people who should be helping as well. So ideally, from our point of view, I think we can agree on that, is that ideally the healthcare system or the society itself would give you the resources you need to do the job you are forced to do. And that would be my goal, hopefully, that's what we are working on because we don't get drugs out of the clubs, and the people are there, and the people need help in that situation, but that's also a point where they can find help, where they can find support, where there's a community to help them. Maybe after they did a withdrawal, they're still part of the culture, they get support, and they hopefully get continuously support. But you pointed out in several points, you need the resources to do that extra job that is forced on you, and that's something I would like to add.
Okay. Yeah.
We feel you.
I guess what you just said, Lukas, is pretty much what we've been saying in awareness and diversity as well. If there's racism or sexism in society, there's going to be racism and sexism in clubs. So it's never going to be out if it's still happening in society. So I just feel like there's a particular focus in club culture because also we care, I guess, and it's a container, right? It's a specific scene that you can look at, but the problem is obviously beyond clubs and also beyond what clubs can do right now. But we hope that this conversation was kind of a good starter. And
I would like to ask one thing for Lukas, because we got this question very often, and it was really like, is there evidence of long-term consequences of G consumption? And the other thing is, when do I call an ambulance, and how do I recognize a person overdosing? What's the best first step? So I think that's a very practical thing we might close with for today. And I guess what we realized is that this is just the starter of the dialogue, and we really have to go on and doing this and facilitating this dialogue.
Okay, let me try to find a quick answer. Like Pansy said it before, GBL or GHB is a body that it's a substance that the body produces itself. So there's no clear evidence of like long-term damage by GHB because it's an inherent substance. Liver, nephrons, the body gets along with that pretty well. But the problem is GBL is a toxic substance. It's damaging skin. And that's where the problem is with GBL. I think we've talked about that before. The throat, the stomach, that's where the problem starts. So long-term users, they have problems with their teeth, with their throat, with their stomach. The second part was, how do you recognize someone who has an overdose?
Overdosing.
That's probably someone.
What's the first step, and when do I call an ambulance?
We've talked about that before. First step is get help. Might be the staff, might be an ambulance. In my introduction, I quickly talked about how to call an ambulance without getting the police involved. Just describe the symptoms, don't name the substance, that should do the trick. And then it's just call, like someone with a GBL overdose, they are in a life-threatening situation. That's nothing a club or any of you or us can handle. That's where medical professional needs to come into play, so call an ambulance if there's a person unconsciousness and she's not responding to you trying to reach her. So that's, I think, what I can say to the situation. Call help, act as fast as you can.
And maybe I think the symptoms were the question, actually. And actually the most dangerous situation is the breathing problems that can occur. So if a person is really pale and the lips are blue, eyes maybe, the pupils are not seeable anymore. If the person gets cold and so on, this is really, might be, hints that it's getting really dangerous.
I think that would go into too much detail, but of course, keep the people warm.
Of course, much more.
You should give them, help them breathing, but that's not something a club goer should be doing. Yeah. Maybe clubs can do that, can educate in that way to do the first or the advanced life support, but I think that's not something club goers should do.
Also seizures, of course, can be really dangerous.
Get professional help. I think that's the that's the correct answer.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I guess that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone that came out to listen, and everyone at home, and you on the panel.
We will put this online afterwards on the Club Commission channels, on the Awareness Academy channels. We will provide contact points and keep in touch. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.